Welcome to Rayner on Leadership. My name is Tom Rayner. I am joined by Sam Rayner, and we are also joined by Kyle Thompson. If you don't know Kyle Thompson, you need to know Kyle Thompson. I tell you what, his podcast is hot. I mean, if you're not listening to it right now, you need to go in and do so. And we've got the information, but I just want to go in and tell you before I go any further. First of all, Kyle, welcome to Rayner on Leadership.
Glad to be with you guys. Ready to get after it.
All right, let's do that. Kyle is the host of the Undaunted Life podcast, created specifically for men seeking to push back spiritual and cultural darkness. The Undaunted Life podcast is in the top 6% of all podcasts and growing daily. You can reach him and see more about his ministry at undaunted.life. That's undaunted.life. And before we get started, Sam, we have a longtime friend who has returned as a sponsor. Isn't it cool or isn't it smart?
It's both cool and smart,
Yeah,
which is a great segue to talk about Smart Church Solutions with Tim Cool.
Yes, the owner of Smart Church Solutions is Tim Cool. They are making available the Emergency Preparedness Handbook. You just enter your email and the link below and in the show notes. There's several reasons why security is critical at your church. First and foremost, it helps prevent potential harms to individuals or the property. In addition to protecting against physical harm, security is also important for maintaining the integrity and reputation of the church. Finally, security is essential by maintaining the trust and confidence of our members and the wider community. Our partner, Smart Church Solutions, focuses on all these things related to church facility management, and they've developed this free gift for you, and we want you to get it. You can download the resource for free in the show notes by going to smartchurchsolutions.com/security, or just look at the link in the show notes. Now, I want to get started by asking this question of Kyle Thompson. Who is Kyle Thompson? Tell us something about yourself, and we'll see what direction you go with that.
Yeah, sounds good. So there's a lot there, but we'll go with the easy stuff. So kind of how I got into what I'm doing now is I became a Christian as a 10th grader. No one in my church or no one in my family went to church, and that's kind of still that way to this day. And so I started going on my own because that's where all the cute girls hung out on Wednesday nights, was at the church, and so that's what drew me there. But we had a hellfire and brimstone preacher come in on a Sunday night, and I didn't want to burn in hell because all the volcanoes and all the earthquakes that were happening on the earth, and so accepted Christ and kind of started my walk then. But the interesting thing about that timing, gentlemen, is around the same time I was learning what it meant to be a Christian, that's around the same time I was learning what it meant to be a man, right? 15, 16 years old, that type of thing. And so what I noticed, at least at the time, what I thought is all the manly men were outside the church doing like man stuff, and all the godly men with, their press shirts and their khakis and, all that kind of stuff, they were inside the church, giving you limp-wristed handshakes and telling you they'll pray for you and, that kind of thing. And so that was my dichotomy well into my 20s. And then I noticed, hey, there's a lot of guys that are kind of wired like me. They got broken noses and cauliflower ears and stuff like that. And are they missing out on who Jesus is because they walk into church and they see all these kind of softer guys, and they're like, well, I don't really want to be like that. And they don't see Christianity as a manly endeavor. They don't see Jesus as this manly guy. They see him as this, soft featured Danish guy that's really, he really cares about your feelings that day and that type of a thing.
Did you say soft feeling Danish guy?
Soft-featured Danish guy, how he's portrayed in all these pictures and everything like that. He doesn't really look like the Lion of Judah. He doesn't really look like a guy that you would want to follow into battle necessarily. And so, long story short, I started helping with some men's ministries. I started some men's ministries because most men's ministries are just women's ministries that are repackaged for men, right? So as opposed to doilies on the logo, it's, like skulls and, beef jerky or whatever. And so I started doing some things in that space and just really trying to counteract the narrative with a lot of men's ministries, because I think the men's ministry way of the approach is pretty broken in a lot of ways. A lot of churches focus, if at all, they focus on men's programming, not actually ministering to men, creating man-friendly churches. And eventually that led to Undaunted Life and, our tagline, equipping men to push back darkness. So we're very much so and unapologetically trying to equip men with the tools that they will need to push back against all the predations and darkness that we see in culture. And so hopefully that brings us up to where we're at today.
I like it. Sam?
Yes. So we're talking to Kyle Thompson, who does not believe that Jesus was a soft-featured Danish man, and I would have to agree with you, Kyle. I don't think that he was. And all of
He was
those
a rough Middle Eastern construction worker. Like that's a
Yes.
guy I can hang out with.
Yeah, I've kind of described it this way. If you want a modern day equivalent of Jesus, watch Dangerous Catch. It's a show. It may not even be on anymore. And the fisherman dudes, that's kind of more like the way Jesus was than anything else.
Yeah, Deadliest Catch. That's the thing. It's where like we never
Deadliest
think
Catch,
about
there you
Jesus as a rough guy. We never think about that. But again, if you actually read the Bible, not like this, if you actually like read it, you see like he was a rough dude. And like I've said some pretty incendiary things in my day, but I've never said something that made a crowd of people like chase me out of town and threaten to like basically throw me off a cliff. And then me just walk out of there by basically being like, nah, that's not happening today. That's never happened before. You don't get that if you're just constantly walking around carrying lambs and kissing people on the tips of their noses. So like, yeah, rough dude, and I'm all for it.
So let's talk about men's ministry. Because I think in a lot of churches, it's absent or done poorly.
Sure.
So what do you see out there, and what do you recommend?
Yeah. So I'm at least trying to be more careful now. I don't want anyone that's frustrated with their church or with church in general or with men's ministries to use my words as an excuse for why they shouldn't be involved in the local church. So I want to be careful and I want to frame it in that way. But as I said earlier, guys, churches focus on men's programming. Okay. So usually if somebody in the church is responsible for men's ministry, it's at the end of like 7 other titles. Like they're in charge of the coffee ministry and Sunday school ministry and the parking lot ministry and men's ministry. And what they do is once, maybe twice a year, they'll do like a chili cook-off or like a, hey, let's all come together and eat meat thing. And they'll invite some former, college football player that used to chase women and do cocaine to come in and be like, Jesus saved me and he could save you too. And like that's fine. But that's not men's ministry, you see. That's not discipleship. That's men's programming. And programming's fun, but it's just like going to the movies. You're being entertained. You're not necessarily being filled, and you're certainly not filling up other people's cups. And so I think a lot of churches need to, again, most of them don't focus on it anyway, but if they're focusing on men's ministry, they need to change their mindset to focus on their church being man-friendly. Man-friendly. What that will do is that will change the sermon content. It will change the programming. It will change the discipleship programs. It'll change the music, because when your worship leader is kind of effeminate and he's picking songs that are in a key that most men can't hit, and the lyrical content, if you were to read it like a poem, it would be like a guy reading a love letter to his boyfriend. Most guys don't understand why that doesn't connect for them. And, because most churches, they're scared of the Psalms and they're scared of the warlike language and they're scared of the Lion of Judah. And so, but if you're focused on making your church man-friendly, it will become more man-friendly. And if you get the men to come to your church and to be involved and to start catechizing their families, everything else kind of flows from that. I mean, I've gotten letters from worship leaders that are like, Kyle, I never once in my entire career of leading worship ever thought about whether or not the men could sing the songs I was choosing. They were just the songs I like to sing. And when I saw the men in the crowd with their hands in their pockets, like hoping to God this would be the last song, it never occurred to me that was potentially my fault or something that I could change. And so part of this is, and I hate like bringing awareness, because what exactly is that supposed to do? But I want to bring awareness to pastors and to teachers of the word. Like, look, have your men in mind. That doesn't mean it will be to the detriment of the women and the children in your congregation, the exact opposite. Because if the men in your congregation are on fire and getting after it, don't you think that's going to trickle down to how they provide headship to their family and catechize their children? Start with the men.
Hey, Sam, Kyle's comments remind me of one of our co-laborers at Church Answers, Brad Wagner. Yeah, for some reason, this conversation.
Brad's not a soft-featured Danish man either.
No. And Brad screams at worship leaders one-on-one, not during the worship service. Sing in a key where I can sing. And he has a rough voice like this. He said, I can't sing with you. If you want me to sing, you better get it where yes, he's a Wyoming rancher. And he says, let me sing like a man, not like a woman. Sounds just like him, doesn't it?
Well, it goes back to, because I tell people, they're like, when did all this start? It's like, look at the Industrial Revolution and look at the World Wars. So we went from the men being in the communities, in the churches, in the homes, to being in some factory or underground somewhere, shaking hands with the devil as they try to get coal out of the ground, or they were on some godforsaken battleground in Europe somewhere, dying. And when they got back, they were shell shocked. They had PTSD. We didn't know what that was at the time. And so the only people left in the churches were the women, the sickly, the old, and the effeminate. And so it's like, of course, the music and the content of the sermons would bend more towards your audience. That's marketing 101. You look at your target market and you cater to it. That's how we get to today, where the overwhelming majority of Christian books are purchased by women. The overwhelming majority of Christian music is consumed by women. So it's like, look, I'm not hating on you. If you're a worship leader, keep catering to the audience that's going to buy your records. I get it. I don't like it, but I understand it.
Let's talk about apologetics, Kyle. And first of all, let's just ask the broad question: Is apologetics important today? And if the answer is an obvious yes, how do we equip men to defend the faith in such a way that makes a difference in the local church and in the culture of which they live?
Yeah, I think the easiest question you ask me today is it important? It's absolutely and wildly important, because so many people now, they have this bumper sticker philosophy that they think sounds good, but it's actually incredibly detrimental. They say stupid things like, I want to be known for what I'm for, not what I'm against, right? And they're like, that's what Jesus would want me to do. But it's like, dummy, if you communicate something you're for, you automatically communicate what you're against, because that's how words work. Right? If I say I'm for strawberry ice cream, I'm communicating that I'm against all the others when strawberry ice cream's on the menu. And so for a lot of men, they don't have a classical education. They don't have a classical liberal arts understanding of how to formulate an argument or defend their position. And so what happens, we'll use an extreme example, abortion. I can walk into most churches in America and destroy just about everybody in there using logic from the other side, because they've never thought through, well, what do I say if someone says, well, what if the woman's raped? And with that one question, I just made them pro-choice, because they're like, oh, I'm pro-life. We shouldn't kill babies and all that. Oh my gosh, this girl was raped and she's 16 years old. Well, I guess we can kill that baby. It's like, okay, well, but you're not pro-life then, right? You're pro-life, but with stipulations. We're downstream from culture. We're downstream from politics, and it invades our worldview. And so for Christians, not becoming a theologian, not becoming someone who professionally puts a microphone on their face and, is, engaging with an atheist for 3 hours in a formulated debate. But you should be able to give a cogent apologia for why you believe what you believe. That's scriptural. But most people, they just hide behind this veil of, well, I don't want to be seen as divisive and I don't want to be seen as judgmental. And so I'm just going to pretend like these things aren't happening. I'm just going to cover my eyes and ears. So yeah, Christian apologetics, I think, is essential to modern Christianity, and also just living in a modern culture where there is constant darkness around us that needs to be pushed back.
And how are you equipping the men in this fashion?
So what I do on my show is I dive into the depths of the dirtiest pools. I see what's going on down there, and then I bring it to my show, whether that's modern philosophies, helping guys understand where does critical theory come from? Why is their elementary school allowing kids to go in a bathroom that doesn't align with their biological sex? And making sure they know about these stories of depravity, because I don't assume guys look at the news cycle like I do. They're not on Twitter seeing what's happening. These are guys that are working. They got stuff to do. And so I'm giving them chunks of understanding, like, hey, if someone says this is something that you can say behind it. Or, hey, this is actually happening, and it's happening in a community just like yours, or perhaps in your community. Did you know that? Do you know how you can push back against that? And so it gets a little bit more granular from there. But just making these men aware that these things are happening around them, that's enough for some guys. But then for other guys, it's like, okay, hey, let's keep digging down. I talk about abortion a lot on my show. I have a resource on my website, how to engage the top 18 pro-abortion arguments. So if someone says, well, you only care about the baby before they're born, or my body, my choice, or whatever thing that they might say, I give you 3 questions that you can ask back to these people, to where it turns the entire conversation back on them, because they have the immoral position. They need to defend it. We shouldn't always feel like we're on our heels as Christians. And so that's one thing I'm helping people do, because most people aren't, bred to fight. They don't really like that. That's not really their thing. But you can be a non-fighter and still defend yourself. So
I have 3 sons. You're looking at the eldest of the 3. He has 2 younger brothers. So I don't know anything but guys, as from a dad point of view. Now, from a granddad point of view, it's different. Sam had his first 2 were girls, and he just said, God's going to give me girls. That's all I'm going to have. Then a boy, then a boy. So now the family is even in boys and girls. And so this question that Sam is about to ask, I think, really pertains to how I raised you boys and how you're raising your children, but particularly Joel and Dominic.
Yeah, I mean, most men will become fathers. Not every man will, but most men will become fathers or have some level of influence over a child. I know that there's some men in our church that we're blessed at West Bradenton to have some incredible men serving in all areas of ministry, especially in the children's ministry. We've got a great group of guys. I'm very proud of my church and the men for stepping up. But let's talk to dads for a moment, because I am a dad, 2 daughters, 2 sons, and then we foster as well. So on any given day, there could be, 53 children in my house.
Yeah, you said Erin went shopping and she brought back 2 kids.
Yeah, no, it's kind of a running joke in our home. Yeah, she goes out for groceries and she brings back children. That's what she does.
That's how it goes. Don't shop hungry.
Yeah, yeah. So, it's something that's near and dear to our heart, is caring for children, training them up, equipping them, and then teaching them the gospel and explaining who Christ is. So, what should dads do to communicate to their kids? And let's, really, and I don't want to leave off the daughters, but particularly the sons, since this is a podcast about men. Like, what should a dad do there?
So I'm a father of 2 sons. I have a 2-year-old and a 10-month-old, and they are going to be the most toxically masculine boys you will ever see, but they will also be balanced. Because one thing that we've seen a lot of guys, try to be the lion and not the lamb, and a lot of guys try to be the lamb and not the lion. But the thing that will make a child feel most protected and most taken care of is if they know that the lion is there, but the lion is under control. And they also know that the lamb is available whenever they need it. And I think this goes back to a concept that we have so jacked up in modernity, and that's the concept of meekness. My boys will understand what a meek man looks like. Because when we see in scripture, it talks about, meek and mild, and the meek shall inherit the earth, we automatically think that means weak, that these are weak people. These are these, limp-wristed guys that are just going to go along to get along and never rock the boat. What meekness means in the actual language, the actual original language, is closer to what a war horse is, what they do to war horses. You meek a war horse, which basically means that war horse is capable of complete power, but it's under the control of the rider. And so I want my sons, and dads out there listening to this, you should be able to display to your children that you have a tremendous amount of power under voluntary control and tethered to the Father's will for your life and for your family. Because a man that is incapable of violence and capable of inflicting harm on another person, that's not a virtuous man. That is a useless man. Because in that moment, if someone breaks into your home or someone tries to do something to you in public and your number one idea is like, let's start a Bible study, I'm sorry, in that moment, the Imago Dei is being violated and it's your job to push back against it. And so, but if that's your MO and that's all you ever are is aggro and going crazy, that's not good either. That is going to make the kid feel scared of you and intimidated. It's not going to lift them up. And so for a lot of these men, it's going to look different. And so I don't know who all I'm talking to, but maybe you're more on the, the lion side, the aggressive side. Maybe you're way more on the lamb side naturally. You need to come to some understanding of stasis so that your kids know that you're capable of both and you're modeling it for both of them as well, because that's what we see in the Gospels. And that's what we see from Jesus. If you only go to a church that, when I go to men's events, I have them raise your hand if your pastor has mentioned Lamb of God in the last year. Everybody raises their hand. And then I say, raise the hand if your pastor has mentioned Lion of Judah, 1 or 2 hands, right? It's like we're not getting a full understanding and accounting of the gospel when we only talk about grace. We only talk about lamb. We have to talk about truth. We have to talk about lion.
Talk to us about this phrase that you use from time to time, biblical masculinity. I think I know what it means just by looking at the 2 words. I want to hear a little bit more, though.
So I think it's important when we get into a discussion about biblical masculinity for all of us to remember something very, very important about the Bible. The Bible is not about us. It was written for us, right? And that's the thing that people get is they read the story of David and Goliath and they think they're David. It's like, nah, bro, you're not David. Like that story is not about you. That story is not so you can live your best life now or whatever the thing is. The Bible is about God, his glory, and what he's trying to communicate to humanity through his word. That's why I like to say things like God says through scripture as opposed to the Bible says, because that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. But when you talk about biblical masculinity, it has to start with the person of Jesus and work outward, in my opinion, because the crux of the Christian faith is our salvation that is found in the sacrifice that we see in the good news of the gospel. Okay. And so you look to Jesus as a model for how you should act and how you should comport yourself in just about every situation, all the while understanding that we don't have a full accounting of Jesus's life, right? Like, I don't think we have a full accounting of what his favorite breakfast was or when he liked to use the restroom, but like, we get a lot of things that we can glean about how to live a better life and to lead our families from the Gospels. But there's so much to learn from everybody else in the Bible. Nehemiah is one that I really enjoy, especially the first 4 chapters of Nehemiah, because Nehemiah acted in a sacrificial way, in a prayerful way. He also acted as kind of like a politician, getting all the people of Israel to come around him and do this thing that they could have done beforehand, but he kind of galvanized them all together. He worked like a CEO, but he also was galvanizing people to defend themselves if that's what it took. And I don't mean from slights, personal slights, but physically. And so when you talk about biblical masculinity, you're not going to find a list of here are the traits of a biblically masculine man. But if you read the Bible for its entirety, it becomes clear to you how you should act in the world and how you shouldn't.
I like it. I like it. We're talking to Kyle Thompson, the host of the Undaunted Life podcast. Once again, you can reach him and you can see more about his ministry at undaunted.life. I tell you what, this has gone quickly, Kyle. You told me it would. You told me it'd be really fast because your podcast is much longer than ours. You're more of a long form. Ours is a short form. So this has gone very, very quickly. But I do want to thank you for being with us and for sharing powerfully so many of these truths that we've heard from you. And it's been good to get to know you on your podcast and on our podcast as well. So thank you for being a part of it.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys.
Okay, Sam, I know you want to say thank you as well to our great sponsor.
Of course, we are incredibly blessed to have Tyndale as a sponsor, and they have these great resources called the Filament Journals. Now, you've heard me talking about filament, and I love anything filament. If you've been listening to this show, you know how I feel about it. It's one of the most recommended resources that I, as a pastor, share with people. And it's got this app to where you scan the page number. It pulls up all this information about whatever text is there. It is absolutely incredible. But now they've paired the power of filament with journals. And as a writer, as somebody who enjoys putting things to paper, pen to paper, this is a great collection. So you need to go check out the Filament Bible Journaling Collection. It offers one of the most portable and interactive study Bible experiences out there. And it's in all the books of the New Testament. So thin, portable, it's great. These journals have the filament enabling to them. So you can get, 25,000 study notes, 350 videos, 1,500 devotionals. This is a very powerful resource to make your devotional time that much better. So check out the Filament Journals, the Filament Bible Journaling Collection from Tyndale. We're glad to have them as a sponsor, but even more so, I recommend them as a pastor. So thank you, listeners, for tuning in today to Rainer on Leadership. Please take a moment, rate, review, and subscribe. If you've just landed here, you haven't done that yet, it would just do us a big favor. If you're on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe there as well. And again, thanks to Kyle Thompson for sharing with us today. Again, you can learn more about Kyle at undaunted.life. We'll see you on the next episode.